Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to be your best self. Well, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today I want to get you fired up about the human condition. My guest today is Paynter, and he has written the book Disturbing Reality. Intriguing, right? We're talking about the human choice and as well as human tragedy. And all of those things, I think, have affected us, or at least the one we know, in one way or another. Disturbing Reality is a book that is compiled of poems that reflect God as a great all-knowing person, but also as various paths, even sometimes when our roads may be a little twisted or even a little broken. The final plan is in one's life is to determine and to figure out one's choices along one's path. So without any further ado, let's get Tad in here. Good morning. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me today.
Good morning, Dr. Angela, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I am excited to talk about such an interesting topic. But one of the things that I like to do is ask my guests, who are they? We tend to have such really long bios, and folks do a lot of great stuff, and all of that's really nice. But, who are you in your own words?
Well, basically, I left school in the 8th grade. I had no formal training in writing or English literature. I did go back, get my GED. I became a self-employed plumbing contractor here in the state of North Carolina. When I was 18, I was the third youngest in the state to have my unlimited license. And I've always been drawn to poetry for one reason or another. And so I basically started writing, and, it progressed and progressed. And I had a compilation, so to speak, that, finally my wife told me, she said, I've showed this to a few people, and they get really emotional because it applies to, something in their life one way or the other. Mm-hmm. And she said, you ought to really publish this. And my son encouraged me also, and I published it. And I've had great reviews of it, and that's, pretty much it, basically.
It's so wonderful when your family members can be really open and honest with you, and that you're able to trust their opinion of your works, and they're not going to just gas you up and say, oh, yeah, it's great, it's fine, and it isn't. It's wonderful to be able to have family members. I know that I have family members like that, and they are such a great, great resource.
Thank you. Yeah, they are.
Now, you are in the Fuquay-Varina area of North Carolina. Have you found that you enjoy being on the East Coast, but then at the same time enjoying some of the Southern traditions that we have?
Oh, I take all the Southern traditions at heart. My mother, who just passed, was a great Southern woman. My father, they had been married 52 years, and we celebrated all the Southern traditions, and we still do. I still say ma'am and thank you and please, and I still open the door for people and for ladies, etc. So, yeah, I totally embrace the Southern part of my life.
I love it. I am born and raised a Southerner, so I can understand there's just something quite special about who we are and the way that we do things. So it is a joy to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about your book, Disturbing Reality. Now, I have to ask you about the title. Did you find that the title came to you first, or did it come to you as you were writing the book?
It definitely came when I was writing the book, because I found a lot of the topics were topics that nobody really wanted to discuss in society. They just all walked around them. Everyone wanted to turn a blind eye. Everybody was a myth of certain things with the human condition. And in my book, it has different scenarios of things that have happened, I've observed or been part of, that, reality is not always black and white, cut and dry, and it can be disturbing at times. And that's why, after writing several of the stories in the book, I came up with that title, because a lot of people that were reading it, they said, well, this is reality, but at the same time, it's very disturbing too in some portions of it. Not all of it, but some portions of it.
Now, we always tend to have some type of motivation or inspiration when we are writing any particular work that we're doing. Did you have a particular motivation while you were writing, or was there anything that kind of inspired you to continue through to the end?
Basically, the inspiration was, like I say, I was seeing the human condition in different ways, or, that 90% of the population does not take into account. And I started thinking about these things that, again, as a Southerner, I was thinking, I wouldn't have done that way, or I would have said that way, or you just simply overlooked this person that was standing there. And that, I guess, was my motivation. And, I wanted to put into words, what I was seeing and what I was hearing, and, things that were close to me in my heart. And that really was the motivation for it. It was a 10-year project, actually, and it covers a wide range of subjects. And so basically, that was my motivation for it. And, just putting the word out there so other people could share some of the same things. And if they actually read the book, I've had people read the book and come to me and say, Ted, I read the book. I cannot believe I was so blind to different parts of, the human condition. So, everybody that has read it has had some correlation with some story in the book.
Right. Now, you kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, and you said that there are such different dynamics to the book. Some stories are kind of a little dark, but then there are some that aren't so dark. Why did you choose to add both the gray areas and the not so gray areas?
Well, Dr. Angela, if you think about your everyday life, it's not always perfect, I'm sure. And but there are certain aspects of your life, I'm sure, that are totally, euphoric in nature, that you're having the best day of your life. And the book is built to simulate reality, and that it's not always great and wonderful, and God's plan does not always work out. You have choices to make in life, and some people make the wrong choices, and some people make the right decisions. So just like reality in our everyday lives, there's white, there's dark, there's gray, and we march through those colors every day in our life, several times a day, that people don't even realize they're going through. They just take it as everyday life. I've got to go to work, and I've had a bad day, or I've got to go home and, do this, pay bills, etc. But every step of life and every day we go through some sort of, we're dark now, we're white here, we're light here, we're gray here, we're back to black here. So that's kind of where that, comes from. That's why I decided, I couldn't write just one style. I had to include the good, bad, and ugly.
And that's so true. I like how you said that. You couldn't write just one style, because our lives aren't just one thing. It really is a mashup of all of the different experiences and emotions and all of that. That is so true. Now, are there any particular poems that you have found to be your favorite? Like, do you have one that's your absolute favorite, or do you have maybe two or three that you're really drawn to, or you find that you tend to like to share with others?
Johnny in the book, that was one I was actually involved in. And that was it's a very warming story. And Scared Straight was someone I actually knew that turned their life completely around. One of them, Butterfly, is about a little girl that was saved by a butterfly from being hit by a drunk driver. But
Wow.
her, the butterfly landed on her window that night, and it was actually her mom's spirit.
Aww.
So,
Sweet. Okay. So I see what you mean. It's a little bit of everything in there. Got ya. Now, when you were writing, did you find that it was easy to write? Like, did it just come to you, or did this take? Did it kind of become a labor of love, so to speak? That it took a little bit longer than you thought?
Well, basically, it started out with just me, freestyle, just writing it in a notebook. And then I would hear something or I would see something. I'll be like, that is so strange. Let me write that down and see, for an idea that other people could relate to, let me put that in the book. And then it took on a life of its own. It started to evolve. And, I basically knew when the evolution was complete because at the end of the book, I was done. I was actually done. I felt a sense of accomplishment. There was nothing else to put in it that I could think of. It was, to me, it was something that started, very small. It evolved, got a life of its own, and then just consumed me. And then when the last story was done, I knew in my heart that, it's done. And so that's kind of how, it went from there. It went through those stages. And that's why it took 10 years to write, because I was very critical of what I put in the book, the stories I put in the book, about certain people, etc.
I like how you said that you were done and you knew that you were done. And I think that for so many people, and it could not only just apply to writing, but sometimes even when we're cooking or we are creating with paints, sometimes there's that hard, fast stop there. You're done. But we can add a sprinkle too much of a spice, or we could add one color too much, and boy, does it take it in the wrong direction.
It does. So, yes.
Yeah, I'm really glad.
I was almost sad, though, when it hit me, because I have enjoyed doing it so much. And it was just like you said, it was just that hard, final, last word, stop, period, it's over, it's done. And, it was kind of heartbreaking at the same time.
Of course, because that had kind of become your baby, if you will. That it was more than just you sharing, with yourself, so to speak, just writing yourself, but it had become that labor of love to share with the world. So I can understand that. Well, I'm glad that you were able to get it all out and to share with the rest of us, because poetry is such a beautiful way to share our thoughts and our hopes and just everything that we want to be able, our praises and all of that with everyone else, and we can kind of follow the storyline and kind of go on the journey with the author. I think it's a beautiful way to do that. Well, Tad, it is time for us to go to break, and I want to give you the opportunity to make sure that our listeners know where to pick up a copy of your book, but also how can they find you online?
Okay, they can find me on Facebook at Tad Paynter. They can email me at tadpaynter at gmail.com. And you can pick up the book, Barnes & Nobles, Amazon, Exibris. They all have the book. You can order wherever books are sold. And that's probably, best. You can get it online or you get a hard copy, either one.
All righty. Well, listeners, we need to take a short break. We'll be back. We are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Tad Paynter, and he is the author of Disturbing Reality. So today we're talking about human choice, human sacrifice, and human tragedy. Now, I know, Tad, that many times people hear those words and they go, choice, the sacrifices that we made, the tragedy that goes on in our lives. But just in case someone joined the show a little bit later, can you tell us, how did you come up with those topics, or how did you come up with those particular words to include in your writings, and that choice, the sacrifices that we make and the tragedies we experience?
Well, it was a very hard decision to base my writings on humanity alone. They're not based on, what everybody else is into today. They're not the social media stuff, things like that. But it's really based on, like the person you see, standing on a street corner that's having a tough time in life. And everybody passes them by, but then you actually stop and you talk to that person. You find out their story. You find out that they made bad choices in life, no matter what it was. Some of it, not of their own fault. Some of it completely their fault. And then you talk to other individuals that have, sacrificed limbs to save another person, or to people who have died trying to save another person. Their humanitarian struggle that they were willing to take the challenge. It didn't work out for them, unfortunately, but, they sacrificed. And then you come to the tragedies like, you end up with soldiers that are killed overseas coming home to someone they just married, or someone that, they married and they've got 5 kids waiting for them at home to be told dad will never come back home again, or mom's not coming back home again. So there's a lot of tragedy in the world that, we see on TV and we just dismiss. But when you really sit down and you look around your home and you say, look, I've got my family here. What can those people possibly be going through right now? To get that phone call and to know your loved one's 2,000-3,000 miles away. I don't really think in this day and time with so much division and so much anger, I don't really think people sit down and put themselves in that place. I don't think people make sacrifices as much as they used to for one another. They like to say, oh, I didn't want to get involved in that, or, that was not my job. And back to the choices. We make choices every day. We make choices to get in the car, go to work, or walk to work. To eat at this restaurant, to eat at that restaurant. But a lot of us need to realize that other people have choices that are detrimental daily choices of, where am I going to eat? Basically, what am I going to get to eat today? Not what can I eat? It's what will someone give me or help me get today, So that's kind of a little bit of the background of where all of that comes from, and it's all in the book. Several stories depicting all of that are in there.
Oh, but such a wonderful understanding that I think that everyone will have now with the explanation that you've given. And I think that for each example, someone was going, oh, yeah, that's right, that applies to me, or someone that has applied to, especially when you talk about the tragedies. So many times we forget about the families that are serving as well, and I mean the wives that are left home with the kids, or even the husbands sometimes.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
And it really does affect, and it can affect a community when that happens as well, and I think we forget about that. Thank you so much for mentioning that.
That's correct. Absolutely, I agree. And people just don't have time to really, sit down, and people are just so desensitized nowadays to everything except what's in their little microcosm, their little corner of the world.
And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said people have this feeling of, I just don't want to be involved. I just don't want to be bothered anymore. So that is so true. I want to ask you about the type of person that you believe will be drawn to your book. Sometimes we know exactly who that is. It might be one type of person, or it might be 2 or 3 different types of people. When you were writing, who did you see as the target or the ideal reader for your book?
That's the same question my publisher asked me. I might have to give you the same answer. I did not have a target audience in mind. I believe the book that I wrote, I believe it spans teenagers to 95-year-old people. It's got something for everyone that someone can relate to, that has been through, this or that, or even the good things in the book that they've seen other people do or may have engaged in themselves. So as far as a target audience or a focus group audience or a poll-tested situation, none of that ever came to mind, either when I was writing the book or when I was having the book published. And I also wouldn't have changed anything in the book to, market to any particular person, because it's made for everybody. Everybody can get something out of it.
And it's so funny because I was going to ask that question. Is that, do you think that this is a book that's just for someone who will say, yeah, I'm big on faith, or I'm a diehard Christian, or could it even be for someone who says, well, you know what, I may not be a religious person, but I think I'm a spiritual person in that I might not go to church every day, every Sunday anymore, but I still love God. Would that
Absolutely
be able to do as well? Great. Okay.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Whether you have faith or not, personally, I believe in Jesus, and he's probably helped me through a whole lot of times that I probably I owe him a whole lot. But I do feel like you can read it if you're a diehard Christian, if you are seldom visit church, even if you have any sense of your own morality and spirituality. The book would be a good read for you, because it draws things, again, in the book, there's some people, especially in Scared Straight, that converted their life over one night's time and devoted themselves to God for, reasons that we don't quite understand, but it happened, and it's a good thing. So, yeah, it could be for non-believers as well as believers.
Now, and I think that has that really will help someone who's going, oh, great, because I was so interested.
Right.
Sometimes with it being Faith Talk Radio, you never know who's going to hear, who's going to hear your show, or perhaps someone is riding in the car with someone else and they're tuned in. Thanks so much for tuning in. And it's like, hey, that sounds like a really great book. I want to pick that up too. That's wonderful. Now, when you hear the comments about your book, do you find that people are sharing their stories with you as well? That not only are they saying it was a great read, but are they sharing the story of how the book has changed them, or they have a story that's similar to something that you wrote about, and your story helped them come to a better place or have closure about something?
Yes, Dr. Angela. I've had people that have read it, and they've come to me and said, I've had a very similar situation, and this makes me see things so much differently than I did before. I've had people come to me and say, this is exactly what I needed to read. And I'm not just bragging on my book because I wrote it. I'm saying these are actual people that have gotten very emotional, that have lost children and find some solace in it, in the book, just by different explanations. People have lost loved ones or have gone through, drug abuse, substance abuse, alcohol abuse. They come to me and they say, hey, that was really, really inspiring, and it did make me change some things in my life. So it has helped people spiritually, overcome addiction, find their path in life, some of them. And the military is honored highly in my book. I respect the military very much, although I never served. I was not able to get into the Marine Corps because I didn't finish high school. But I give them all the props in the world. And they're featured in the book along with some veteran stories that are true stories. And yeah, I think I've had nothing but good response with the book.
I love it. I love it. Now, when we think of a a typical author, um, everyone has kind of a picture that pops into their heads of, either someone who wears glasses, doesn't wear glasses, someone is loves words, like they talk a whole lot, or someone who's really, really quiet. When you describe yourself as an author, just as an author, so not all the other things you are, just your author hat, what would you say, what type of writer would you say that you are? What type of personality does your author hat take on for you?
I'm very, I guess you would say, A-type personality. Mm-hmm. I can get along with anybody. I have deep conversations, deep intellectual conversations with people. I've read Shakespeare. I've read the Bible, just about everything in between.
Right.
I've spoke to a lot of people about different situations they've been in to help compile the book. And I don't think those people would open up to me if I wasn't, was some type of person that they felt like they could trust. And so I was, I'm like that when I'm an author. I'm like that actually when I'm not an author. So my life has not really changed. I know a lot of people say, hey, I'm an author, and everything in their life changes. I don't sit around and drink brandy in front of the fireplace and get philosophical in a smoking with a pipe and glasses. So that stereotype is completely not me. And the only time I write on the computer is when I have to get something to my publisher. Everything else has all been handwritten. It's been written on job sites. It's been written at the kitchen table. It's been written on vacation or just wherever it hits me. So that's kind of the way I classify myself as an author.
But it's so interesting that you say that, because when we talk to some of the greatest writers, when we look historically at people who have written awesome books, there are just as many people that have written their books longhand, and for our younger listeners, that means that they took pen to pad of paper and wrote, the book themselves, or even used a typewriter. Because I think in today's world, so many people think, oh, well, you can just do it on your laptop, or you can even do it on your phone, forgetting that there's a certain connection that you make when you continue to write down your ideas, which is such a lost art form nowadays. So I think that I'm sure is expressed in some of your writings, because there was that connection with still writing it out and the way that it feels when you write it down. So thank you for being true to yourself and not trying to, be something that you aren't. So thanks for keeping it that way. So we have about a minute left in the show, and I just want to kind of leave it open for you, Tad. And I just want to say, is there a bit of wisdom, I call it those nuggets of wisdom, that you would like to share with someone, either related to your book or about writing? Is there something that you'd like to pass on to our listeners?
Well, basically, the one thing I'd like to pass on is that don't see everything in black and white, and don't always conform. Take your mind and transform, as described in Romans. Mm-hmm. So you'll take that message and go through your life and look at things differently. Scrutinize life. Analyze what you say. Analyze your actions. And at the end of the day, see if you're still happy with yourself about the decisions you made. And if you are, then you made the right decisions. If you have doubts, wake up tomorrow morning, try to do something differently about that, and make a change if you can in somebody's life, because until you know that person, you will never know their story. And judging the book by its cover is one of the best terms I can use. Just because you see a man that's tattooed up and he's wearing black boots and a cut-off T-shirt, and he looks like the meanest guy on the planet, read my book and you'll find out what mean guys like that do. And you'll find out, and it will, like everybody tells me when they read that story, they just bawl every time. And when they see someone like that now, their whole mental attitude has changed. And that's what the book was made to do, was to promote unison and, deeper thought, analytical thought of every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just like to say thank you for having me on your show today, Dr. Angela. It's been great, and I have really enjoyed speaking with you.
Well, Tad, thank you so much for being on the show, and I just wish you even more success with your book, Disturbing Reality. Thank you for being on the show.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to be your best self. Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get our teens fired up. That's right, the Bible is filled with real people, not just worship icons with halos around their heads. These include real teenagers and middle grade kids who made some mistakes and even got into some trouble. But today, author Rolin Bruno's fictional treatment fills the gaps in the Bible stories while remaining faithful to the message from Scripture. Kids and teens who read these books will want to follow up to learn even more, and that's what we want to do. We want them to be inspired to want to read even more. So let me tell you a little bit more about Rolin. Rolin Bruno is a Bible scholar and evangelist with a vivid imagination that fills the gaps in Bible stories. He has a calling to serve kids, teens, and the homeless and to bring the truth to the Bible. While in California, Rolin served as an assistant pastor at a storefront church deep within Skid Row. And I think you guys know Skid Row is unfortunately, that famous homeless area in L.A. While roaming the streets to talk with the homeless, the addicted, and the desolate about hope, about encouragement, and, of course, about our Jesus. He went on to feeding the homeless across the nation, including in Missouri, Mississippi, and in Louisiana. Jumping ahead, Rolin is a 2003 BA graduate of Vanguard University of Southern California, studying ministry. He went on at Vanguard to earn a master's degree in Bible, and in 2006, his master's thesis is on the letter of Jude, Jude and the Scoffers. This 278-page opus is available for you if you would like a copy. So without further ado, pull up your chair, get your cup of coffee, because we are handing Rolin the mic. Good morning. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me today.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be here.
I am so happy that you are here and that we're going to talk about not only your book, but about how it affects our kids and our teens. So thank you for choosing that particular demographic. Now, one of the questions that I want to ask you is that you talk about John and you talk about a boat in the story. Why did you choose this particular topic or theme to get started?
Well, John has always fascinated me as the youngest apostle in serving under Jesus. That's a long tradition of the church. The church, our faith has believed that John was the youngest of the apostles, and all you have to do is look at a painting. Any painting that shows the 12 apostles will have one person in it that doesn't have a beard, and that's because that's John. We're working with writing from the Bible. The Bible is my root and my guide. I don't change anything that's in it, but I've got added things that are fiction that fill in the places where the Bible goes silent. So my title is John and the Jesus Boat. John and his older brother, Big James, were working for their father Zebedee in a 27-foot fishing boat on the Sea of Galilee. And Simon Peter and his younger brother Andrew had a similar boat, and they worked alongside Zebedee in a commercial fishing consortium. That's a wholesale operation. So younger Andrew was probably John's best friend, most probably a teenager also. And don't teenagers get themselves in trouble sometimes?
Mhm. Mhm. And that's so funny how you mentioned that, they're real people, so they are going to get into a little mischief from time to time. So I like that you mentioned that. So for the person who's listening and they say, well, I'm not sure what type of book is it? Is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? Is it really like a kid's book, like a little kid's book, or is this something that my 14-year-old would want to read? How would you answer that?
Well, first of all, this is in the genre of historical fiction. That is a fictional book set in a real time. In fact, on some of these dates that happen here, we know the exact time, because we know the date of the various festivals, and when Jesus was at that festival, and we can pin it down to the day he said things. So when Jesus walked down that beach and said, "Follow me," there's two people got up. That was Simon Peter and his brother Andrew. They got up and followed Jesus and left the boat behind. And then he got over to John and his brother James' place and said, "Follow me." And they got out and followed him as well, but not Father Zebedee. He stayed a fisherman. And his fishing boat remained a fishing boat. The 27-foot long fishing boat that John and his brother Simon Peter used was converted into a taxi, where basically getting themselves and Jesus back and forth across the Sea of Galilee. And so that's why we call it the Jesus boat. And there's more about the Jesus boat.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So there may be someone out there, Rolin, that says, well, you know what? Our Bible says that we're not supposed to add, we're not supposed to take away. But then there may be someone who is saying, well, maybe if we tell the story a little bit differently and we put this part over here, it'll make more sense to the kids. What do you say to the person who says, I'm not sure about this historical fiction thing that you're doing?
Well, one of the things I'm very careful about is to let the reader know exactly what's fiction and what comes from the Bible, because every story is footnoted with a note at the back of the book that'll send you to the actual story from the Bible. So you can look at what was there and compare that with the fill-ins for the story that I put in the blank places.
That is very smart on your part, and I think that will really help the person who is aware and has enough forethought to read all the way to the end and to notice that, because I'm sure some children, like you said, if the goal is to make them want to read more, what a great way of letting them know this is where the story can be found and you can read more by going to your Bible. I think that's a really, really great idea. Now, with your book, who would you say is the perfect age range? Is there a particular age range? Is it okay for older children to read it to younger children? Or is this just for perhaps middle school kids? What's the perfect age?
That's an interesting question, because I found out something after I read the first book. After I wrote the first book, first of all, the people who have looked at it and reviewed it saying that it's suitable for all ages. There's something there for everyone to be interested in. It's not. It won't read like a children's book. But what I found out is that it's written at what they call the middle grade levels. In other words, say from 10 years on up, this book is accessible to older children, and for me that's an important time, because for many, not for all, but for many children of that age, that's the time when they start to question about these stories. Who is this Jesus, and what is this, and is this real, or is this, is this something that I should be wondering about?
Right. Great point. Well, it is time for us to go to break, but before we do that, Rolin, I want to make sure that everyone is reminded of the title of your book, as well as where can we purchase or pick up a copy? How do we follow you online?
Well, you can follow me online by just looking for my name, Rolin, Rolin, Bruno, and I'm right there on Facebook and several different places. But if you're looking for the book, Amazon is the best place. Barnes & Noble has it, but Amazon is the best place. Go to Amazon and type in a search for John and the Jesus Boat, and my books will pop up in front of you.
All righty. Well, now you know where you can pick up a copy of the book. Well, listeners, we need to take a very short break. But when we get back, we will continue talking about John and the Jesus Book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Rolin Bruno, and we are talking about his book, John and the Jesus Boat. Now, Rolin, one of the things that you mentioned about the book is that it is historical fiction. What inspired you to write in that particular genre?
That's interesting because I really didn't know what I was doing when I was doing it, but I was driven to tell these stories, and I was struck by the young men that I'd met actually the children, the children that were street kids in Western Pennsylvania, and their questions. I had become in effect an evangelist for street kids, and I would go out and round them all up and feed them on Sunday morning and take them to church. And these kids had questions, and the questions weren't being dealt with, and they felt intimidated by being among all these other Christians, and they didn't feel free to open up and question things such as God. What's this God idea? What's going on? And to be able to get an environment where you don't have to be afraid to ask the question that's on your mind.
And I think you probably really helped free them in understanding that it was okay to talk to you and to be able to ask those questions. Because you're right, especially teens in particular, they do want to know that it's okay to ask the question and that they're not going to be chastised or criticized or judged in any way by their question. So that's a really great thing that you did there. So you talk about the Jesus Boat. Tell me about this Jesus Boat.
Yes. We've talked about the Jesus Boat as the one that ended up being a more or less a taxi service back and forth to the other side of the lake. But and that boat itself comes into question at the end of the Gospel of John, when Jesus catches the Peter and some of the rest of the disciples out fishing when they're supposed to be out evangelizing, and he has a loving, kindly conversation with John, and we put that into the context of Peter. We can put that into a context of who Peter is, and it gains more meaning. The boat itself may have been discovered in 1986. In 1986, we found the archaeological community found a boat that's 27 feet long, mired in the sand of the Sea of Galilee, which was at its lowest place in many years. And they were really excited because this could have been the boat that Jesus was in. If not, it's very similar to it. And it's a place where we can touch something that was real in Jesus' life 2,000 years ago. It's there in a museum in Israel, And if you go touring there, stop by the Yigal Alan Museum and take a look at the Jesus boat.
That is so awesome. I love that. Now, I believe when we talk about famous artifacts, I love how they are starting to find more and more of these biblical artifacts, and many times they're being unearthed by people that are actually trying to disprove the Bible or prove that the Bible isn't real, and they end up proving that the Bible is real. So that is really amazing. Do they have any plans to do anything special with what they call the Jesus boat?
They've done all the research and were able to date the boat to the exact time when it was built and in service, and they've identified artifacts that came with it that indicates how the boat was being treated. For instance, it was they found out that the boat was probably being sunk on purpose, that it had been in service for a long time. It had patches on it. It had patches on the patches, and it was time for a new look, you know. And
right.
That's
I
right.
like you said the patches had patches. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it fits there with the Bible study in that particular place, because Jesus invited John basically to give up his boat. I'm sorry, invited Peter and John as well.
Well, it is almost time for us to go to break, but I want to make sure, Rolin, that everyone is able to not only follow you online and visit you, but to pick up a copy of this book. If you can, please, can you remind everyone, what is the name of your book, where can they pick up a copy, and how do we follow you online?
Yes, thank you very much. The most important thing is the name of the book, John and the Jesus Boat. And you can pick that up at Barnes & Noble or Amazon. I'm more familiar with using Amazon myself. It's just a matter of bringing up Amazon and putting in a search term that says John and the Jesus Boat. And you'll come up with all the latest editions and episodes of that book ready to go, ready to be purchased. And if you take it and read it, I promise that you'll be blessed.
All righty. Well, listeners, now you know where you can pick up a copy of John and the Jesus Book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Rolin Bruno, and I am excited about his book, John and the Jesus Book. So, Rolin, how did you get involved with children in Pennsylvania? And how did you know that there were street kids in particular in that city, in the city in which you visited, that needed your attention?
I'll tell you, it was a big surprise to me. It was a surprise, first of all, when I found out that I was going to be a foster father to an 8-year-old, soon-to-be 9-year-old kid, and taking him to school and into school. He lived with me until he was 11, and I got to know all the friends that he had that were out on the street every day after school. And some of them had very scant connections to adult oversight. The young man I was taking care of, his best friend, along with his best friend's mom, were cast out of their apartment with all their stuff locked inside and had to move up in with some friends, sleeping on the couch. And in that house, neither one of them had a key to get in, so the young man had to wait at the front porch until his mother got home from work before he could even go in. As an example of the kind of kids that were there, it was one of those kids who had straight F's on his report card, and he walked around telling all the other kids about his F's and how proud he was that he got a straight F, no other mark. And the other kids were admiring him for that, to have the courage to have straight F's. There's another kid that was eight years old who he said he had 3 different grannies where he could go eat and sleep. He had his choice of where to go that night. And his curfew was 11 o'clock p.m. to get off the street. Yeah, so these things are really jolting and not something we expect to find in our cities here. I think that kid was the inspiration for a 9-year-old boy that pops up in my book, in my first book, and in the subsequent series, and that what it's like to have to be able to live by your own wits. So really, it was really from real kids that we went on to the fictional parents or fictional children that I ended up in my book.
Oh wow! I tell you. Now I understand that your book is self-published. Did you find that it was an easier process, or what attracted you to self-publishing as opposed to going through all of the protocols for a publishing house?
Yes, thank you. When I discovered that, I'm going to write a book, then I started trying to do research to figure out how you get a publisher to publish the book that you write, and I got nowhere. It seemed like I didn't know what places to turn. I didn't know what you needed was not a publisher but an agent, and so I led to that. That led me into self-publishing, and I figured that I published the book on with the self-publishing resources. All I had to do was get a few good reviews, and it'd be off and running. But that, sadly, is not how it works. If you're going to self-publish, you also have to market the book. And I knew nothing about marketing, and made some very critical mistakes. This is my first series of book that I wrote. But so I took a year off from writing just to keep pushing with other people that have self-published and other people that were in the know to find out how to do the marketing. And now I think I'm back on the right track, and I'm going to get some marketing and the visibility for this book, because I really think it's one that people should be reading.
So, Rolin, what is your vision, your overall outlook for your book, John and the Jesus Boat?
The first thing I came up with was that any church that has a youth group and a library should have this book on their shelf. These books, this series of books, series of 4 books, John and the Jesus book, the 4 episodes, that should be made available. Then I think that there, depending on the kids and the youth pastor, there will be some that should be able to find this to be very useful as a basis, a starting point to bring these kids closer to the Bible and closer to Jesus. So I really see it as a springboard to Bible reading. When I was a child, I was reading the Bible, but I don't see that many children reading it today, and they're missing out, because it is a great read.
I love it. And I hope that you are able to definitely get that into as many hands as possible. So it looks like we have about 2 minutes or so left in the show, but I want to ask you, just some author questions, and I love to be able to do this to help our aspiring artists out there. And that is, when you're writing, do you find that you need a particular atmosphere or environment? Do you prefer to write at home, or do you like a Starbucks atmosphere? Do you want to go off to the log cabin? What works best for you?
Thank you. When I'm writing, I'm sitting there in front of the computer, and the ideas start coming, and it just seems like it flows out until I come to a stopping point rather, and I'm blessed now that I'm living in the San Bernardino Mountains with forest all around me and nature, and so I have the opportunity when it's time for a break that I can go out and enjoy the wild and walk with my dog up to the nearby peaks and so forth and become refreshed, because after I've done that, after I've taken a break like that, I come back with a new outlook and a new attitude, and I'm ready to start writing again.
And what a great way to end today's session. Jesus is waiting to be your friend. Rolin, thank you so much for being a guest on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela today.
Thank you very much.
And as always, I leave you with this blessing. May the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, be blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.